Hi, this is Raman, your Alberta real estate tutor. Today we'll take a look at a question that I get asked so often. That is, how much do I need to memorize in order to pass the exam? I'll make this easy for you and break it down. So let's go on to the lesson and we'll dive deeper into this topic. Let's take a look at how much do you need to memorize for the Alberta real estate exam. First, let's understand what the exam is about and what are the different things we need to keep in mind when attempting the exam. First, it's computer-based exam, so it doesn't matter which exam you're writing, whether it's residential, fundamentals, commercial, rural, all of them are computer-based exams, so just keep that in mind. You have anywhere from 90 to 140 exam questions that you will get. So if you're writing a commercial exam, for example, you'll have 90 questions on the exam. If you're writing fundamentals, you'll have 140 questions. For residential, you'll have 100 questions. So all the different exams will have different questions. They're all computer-based. And you need 70% to pass each exam. You will have 3 hours to complete the exam, so there is plenty of time. Most of the students that I have helped, they take about hour and a half to 2 hours at the most. So you have plenty of time. Don't stress over it. You'll have enough time to do your exam and then also review your exam. So you do not need to stress about the amount of time that is available to complete the exam. Another thing to keep in mind is that all questions will be multiple choice questions. And this is really key because when we have multiple choice questions, we have different options. So in this case, we don't really need to memorize a ton of stuff because they would have given us the answers right in front of us. Now, what we need to do is we need to know what the correct answer is. So we need to understand the concepts. So there is less memorization required, but we have to be able to understand the concepts and draw conclusions from that. So that's very important to keep in mind. There are a couple of different types of questions you will see on the exam. First one will be definition-based questions. So here they will give you a term and they will ask you to define the term, or they will give you the definition of the term and they will ask you to pick the correct option where you have to tell them what term it is. So whether they give you a statement and then say, pick the right option for what term it is, or they give you the term and they ask you for definition of the term, it's all the same. So for this one, there are some key terms that you will have to memorize. So this is the part where you do sort of need to memorize some stuff. Again, I wouldn't just cram everything. There's no need to do that. You can just understand the term and see what that is. And when you go to the exam, it will make sense to you. The best thing to do to prepare for definition-based questions will be to understand key terms. So there is a glossary in the back of your book. So it doesn't matter what exam you're writing, whether it's commercial, residential, fundamental. So any of the real estate exams, they all have glossary at the back of the book. So you want to make sure you go through the glossary and you understand the terms in the glossary. Again, you don't need to completely memorize it because it is multiple choice. So the definition will be in front of you, but you do need to understand what that term is and be able to pick out the correct definition. So you can go to the back of the book and look up the glossary and find the term and do it that way. Or I've created a list of most important key terms that you will need in the exam and you can purchase that. But the easiest thing to do is just go to the glossary and understand the terms. Next one is make sure you go through all the unit activities. The unit activities are really good at helping you understand the terms and learn the definitions, especially the activities where you have fill in the blank type of activities. The exam doesn't really have any fill-in-the-blank type of questions. However, they will ask you to define the term. So they can ask you what is real property, for example, or they can ask you definition of condominium and difference between beer land condominium versus your regular condominium. So those terms will be in your book. So make sure you go through the unit activities, and the unit activities are where you will find most of your definition. Another type of questions that you will come across in the exam will be situational questions. These are also called scenario-based questions. Here, they will give you a scenario that will relate to who, what, where, when, why. So they describe a scenario, and then based on the scenario, they will ask you to answer the question. The best way to answer these type of questions will be to get to the heart of the issue. So you want to unpeel that onion and really understand what exactly are they asking you, and based on that, answer the question. So how do you best prepare for these type of questions? First thing is to understand the concepts. So more so than memorizing stuff, you really want to understand the concepts. So for example, what is Dower Act? So you want to understand what Dower Act is, when it applies. So for example, two people need to be married in order for the Dower Act to apply, and they cannot be in a common law relationship. They have to be legally married. And they have to be living in the same house either at the time of the marriage or after the marriage. They have to only have one person who's on the title of the property, not on the mortgage, title of the property. So these are some of the scenarios where the Dower Act will apply. So when you take a concept and break it down into smaller parts, it becomes easier to understand. So that's what you want to do with all your concepts. Break them down and understand the overall concept in order to prepare for scenario-based questions. Another thing you can do is make sure you go through all the examples. In your book, there are many different examples that have been provided in the boxes. So you will see boxes, there is border around these examples, so they stand out in your book. These are the examples that most people don't read through because they're just trying to get through the book. However, when it comes to preparing for scenario type questions, it is best to go through the examples, because a lot of times they will take these examples and give you similar questions to the example. So it is very important to make sure that you go through all the examples so you have an idea of what kind of question they can ask you. And when you go to the book, you will see that the examples relate to the topic. So you know that when you see that type of a question on the exam, they're asking about that topic. So that's a dead giveaway. Another thing you can do to prepare for these type of questions is to make sure you go through all the quizzes. In the quizzes, you will have more scenario questions as well, whereas the activities tend to be more geared towards the definition type of questions. But the quizzes will have both type of questions, scenario-based questions as well as definition questions. So make sure you go through all the quizzes at the end of your unit as well. Not only that, the unit quizzes actually prepare you to understand the concept. When you go to the exam, some of these questions will be different. They will be more scenario-based than they are even in the quizzes. But the quizzes are important because they help you understand the concept. And once you understand the concept, you will be able to answer those scenario questions on the exam. So let's recap. So first thing is, it's a computer-based exam. You have anywhere from 90 to 140 exam questions, depending on which exam you're writing. You will get 3 hours to complete that exam, so you have plenty of time there. All the questions will be multiple choice questions, so you don't need to really memorize a ton of stuff. You don't need to cram. As long as you can pick out the definition from the options, you will be okay. Next, the types of questions that you will see on the exams will be definition type questions. And for these questions, the best way to prepare would be to understand key terms. So go to the glossary in the back of your book and make sure you understand those terms. Another thing you can do is make sure you go through all the unit activities, especially the fill in the blank type of activities, which really help you prepare for these questions. And then you will also see situational questions or scenario-based questions where they will give you a scenario and based on that, they will ask you a question. The best thing here is to make sure you get to the heart of the problem. Forget the names and stuff like that. Don't worry about that. You just need to see what concept are they trying to test you on, and based on that, answer that question. So in order to prepare for these type of questions, you want to make sure you understand the concepts. So really understand the concept, not so much memorize the concept. You want to go through all the examples in the book because the examples relate directly to the topic they are talking about. And you will notice that on the exam, you will see questions that are similar to these examples and they will refer to the topic they were talking about. So examples are very important when preparing for scenario-based questions. Another thing you can do here is to make sure you go through all the unit quizzes. The unit quizzes really help you understand the concepts, which you can then take and apply to the exam. So make sure you do the unit quizzes as well as activities so that you cover the different type of questions that will be asked of you on the exam. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. That's it for today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you next time. If you would like some extra support in preparing for your Alberta real estate exam, I invite you to visit www.albertarealestateschool.com, or you can call me at 587-936-7779. Good luck with your studies, and I'll see you next time.